It's a journey that begins where everything ends. Hello, and welcome to Mego Museum's Vintage Mego, where we talk about the golden era of the world's greatest toy company. I'm Brian, your host, and this week we're going to the black hole, or should I say, going in, through, and beyond the black hole, with a look at Mego's ill-fated 12-inch line of characters for this movie.
There is an inexorable force in the cosmos where time and space converge. A place beyond man's vision, but not his reach.
First, a little bit of history. Many believe that the black hole was Disney's attempt to simply cash in on the popularity of Star Wars. But the film had been in development for years and began life as Disney's attempt to cash in on the popularity of disaster movies. The film boasted an all-star cast, cute robots, impressive special effects, and the Disney brand. It looked like this was going to be the next blockbuster science fiction franchise. This, of course, had licensors flocking to Disney's door for everything from comic books to pajamas, and of course, Mego scooped the big prize in the form of the action figure license. For the license, Mego planned two different figure lines, the 3 3/4 inch figures to follow suit with the current trends, and it would also enable them to offer vehicles and playsets more cost effectively. And our subject of this episode, the 12-inch line. Why not 8-inch? When asked why he went for the 1/6 scale, Marty Abrams once remarked that the 12-inch figures had more of a prestige feel for them. Another factor was probably the price point, as the difference between the 3 3/4 and the 12-inch would have been more than between it and the 8-inch scale. So you have that kind of budget, everyday purchase kind of figure and that Christmas present kind of figure. Also at that time, Mego was really embracing the 1/6 scale, even in their Evergreen Superheroes brand. They were introducing a lot of characters in this scale. 6 figures were produced for this line: Captain Dan Holland, Lieutenant Charlie Pizer, newspaper reporter Harry Booth, Dr. Alex Durant, and Dr. Kate McCrae, who would represent the crew of the Palomino. And representing the Cygnus all alone by himself, we had mad genius Dr. Hans Reinhardt. Each were sold in identical boxes with that striking Mego black hole artwork. The head sculpts were done by a man by the name of Ron Schruby, who worked as a freelancer until Mego hired him as an in-house sculptor. The black hole was set to be Mego's big thing, until it wasn't. The film opened to mixed reviews, and while the movie made a profit, and a lot of kids did like it, it didn't have the cultural impact to last past a single Christmas season. The second wave of figures were canceled in the United States. There were playsets and vehicles never made, and expensive electronic items scrapped. The smaller range enjoyed some modest sales, but the 12-inch line was easily the biggest flop of the Mego black hole range. So let's get into the why. Number 1, the character selection. This is one of the biggest drawbacks when a company has to merchandise a new movie and their creative department hasn't actually seen it. The Mego R&D department had to work far in advance from the film's completion, so some guesswork really has to come into play, and you have to rely on things like stills and studio notes. So the 12-inch line only focused on the human characters in the film. A film that in many ways has more in common with the Poseidon Adventure, which 2 black hole cast members were also in, than it does with Star Trek or Star Wars. The biggest stars of the black hole were the non-human characters, namely the robots, which Mego did wisely include in their first wave of smaller figures, and I'm assuming they were likely the best sellers. While tooling up a 12-inch version of Maximilian would have been super costly, Mego did create an 8-inch wind-up Vincent in scale to the line, and it's very similar to the walking Tweaky that was in the 12-inch Buck Rogers line. But for some reason, it only saw release in Italy. It was canceled in the United States. It's not sure why it wasn't in the initial assortment. Maybe its tooling took longer, but I think it really hurt the 12-inch line not to have a Vincent that went with the human characters. You've got 3 good guys, 2 people that die tragically, hopefully no spoilers, and one bad guy, and two of these people are in street clothes. Even the addition of a 12-inch humanoid would have been likely welcome in this assortment over Ernest Borgnine? Sorry. Number 2, no guns. None of the 12-inch Black Hole characters have weapons, and that was a shame because the blaster in the Black Hole is pretty epic. The only loophole seemed to be non-human characters such as Vincent, and the Sentry had them in the 3 3/4 inch range. But there was a noticeable absence of weapons in the 12-inch range. Seeing as the Mego 12-inch Buck Rogers and Star Trek lines did include weapons, it seems there may have been an edict from Disney about this. Adding weight to this is no toy replica of the laser guns were produced, although one was shown in a Marks UK catalog. I'm sure I wasn't the only kid who used the twin pod cloud car from the Empire Strikes Back line as the Black Hole pistol. Number 3, the scale. Despite creating the action figure genre, the late 70s were not about 12-inch action figures. It truly was about the smaller figures, the vehicles, and the environment. Even Kenner had trouble moving Star Wars figures that were 12 inches tall. They are actually considered kind of a bomb, considering that is the hottest brand out there. It just goes to show you that maybe 12-inch figures, it just wasn't their day. Mego, like a lot of other companies, was really excited to get the Black Hole license. And the more excited they were, the more the price went up. The final total for the Black Hole license was a record-breaking $1 million guarantee at 10%, meaning Mego had to sell $10 million worth of goods. Marty Abrams, who is no fan of the Black Hole, joked in an interview that they sold about $11 worth of Black Hole merchandise. While this is probably not an accurate number, that hefty promise was about to put Mego in a black hole, in, through, and beyond. However, fate smiled on Mego thanks to Disney's newly announced blockbuster, Tron, which they had already begun publicity on when they discovered a serious problem. The toy rights to the name Tron had been sealed shut by a company called Mego. Mego had added Trons to the Micronaut line in the 1970s, and while they were not a big hit, Mego had really locked that branding down. It was airtight. Disney had a real problem, and subsequently so did Mego. So in exchange for the rights to the name Tron, Disney forgave the Black Hole guarantee. Mego was off the hook for that $1 million. One of the best behind the scenes of the Mego Black Hole stories I have, in fact, the best story I have, revolves around toy designer Tory Maccaro, who got his start at Mego while he was still in high school. We did an interview about 10 years back, and Tory told me about how, at the time, he'd be allowed to take unused samples and prototypes from Mego, and he would gift them to his then girlfriend. It was a silly little gesture. He called it little treats. One of the items that he gave her was an original clay sculpt of the Harry Booth head. Tory went on to marry that girl, and he confided with me that he would never part with his Borgnine head. Nothing says I love you like Ernie B. Just a quick note that all 5 issues of our magazine, Toy Ventures, are now available in a bundle. If you like vintage toys, and why would you be watching this if you didn't, please consider checking out our magazine. It is all vintage toys all the time in a premium full-color format. Thanks. The 12-inch Black Hole line was sold in the United Kingdom by Pedigree Toys and in Canada by Grand Toys. No packaging variations have been reported. It's likely that Pedigree used stickers, and I have never seen a Grand Toys boxed Black Hole. One of the more telling signs of the line's failure was the abundance of overstock outfits found on cheap, blow-molded dime store knockoff figures like these. I've seen at least 3 different kinds of figures wearing different Black Hole clothing in my time. I was a huge fan of the Black Hole as a kid. This was my lunchbox in the 4th and 5th grade. To me, it was every bit as interesting as Star Wars. I collected the comics, the trading cards. I had all the action figures I could find, and I listened to that story record endlessly. I loved the Black Hole. A year after the film came out, I came into some money from a great aunt, and I conned one of my parents to drive me to the Scarborough Town Center and visit one of the bigger toy departments in an Eaton's. It was just, you saw stuff you wouldn't see in my town. While wandering those aisles, I remember coming across the 12-inch Black Hole line. I'd never seen them before. To be honest, I didn't know they were a thing. I got excited for a minute. I remember being very excited until I realized that it was just the cast, just the people. There was no humanoid or star in that series. I bought a Star Wars toy that day with my money. As an adult collector, I think they're really nice figures, save for this dreaded Mego molt that gives them a pale, zombie-like pallor these days. There are ways to fix that, the plastic method, that sort of thing. They're well-made figures. They have really nice detail. But mostly I collect them because they remind me of that day wandering the Eaton's toy aisle and discovering this line of Black Hole toys I had no idea existed. I also want to mention that this is a really affordable line to collect. This will not break the bank. If you see high prices on eBay, just wait those out, because I think the most I've ever paid for one of these figures was for Kate, because she was the last one I needed, and she's a little tougher than the rest of them. But I think on average, I've paid about $40 each for these characters, and I collected them over a course of about 20 years. So it's been fun. It's just one of those things you pick away at, and you pick up at shows and flea markets and that sort of thing. So I do highly recommend this line, but I understand why it flopped in 1980. That's all the time we have for this week on Vintage Mego. Hey, if you had these as a kid, please drop me a line in the comments or hit me up in Mego Mania, our Facebook group, or the forums at megomuseum.com. I'd love to know. I never met a kid who had one of these. If you're new to this, I hope you'll consider hitting like and subscribe. We do stuff like this every week. And until next time, be well and talk toys, not others. Cheers.